I thought my business was done. The last 4 years have been as close to a joke as you could ever imagine.
I read somewhere that even in grade 6, you had a prophetic vision that you would one day design jewelry.
When I got to high school, I was told not to even go into art class because I was colorblind. Obviously, that's what ended up happening. We're going to be into the multi-millions, and that's exactly what we did.
I want to talk about branding.
If you're going to build a massive brand, it's pretty tough to be really niche.
How does mental health play into that?
This is going to sound ridiculous.
Wow. Welcome to the Mood Podcast, uncovering the art of conversation through the lens of photography and creativity, one frame at a time. I'm your host, Matt Jacob, and thank you, as always, for joining me. My guest today is Shane Vitaly, the founder and entrepreneur and creative force behind brands like Vitaly and Clocks and Colors, and someone who has redefined what it means to build a fashion empire from scratch. From a $3,000 side hustle to a multi-million-dollar brand house, Shane's journey is raw, unpolished, and fully self-made. But what makes his story so relevant to you isn't just the numbers. It's the mindset, the creative conviction, and the emotional stamina it takes to build something original in a world obsessed with trends. In my conversation with him, we unpack everything from his punk upbringing and colorblind design philosophy to the tactics behind creating a brand that speaks in archetypes, not demographics. We talk about what creative freedom really costs, why so many artists undervalue their work, and how to combine intuition with business strategy without losing your voice in the process. So let's dive in. Here is Shane Vitaly. Shane Vitaly, welcome to the Mood Podcast, my man.
Matt, thanks for having me.
I would have done an intro to this already before the episode, but I don't want to do it disservice. So I think it's best we give the audience a bit of your pedigree, a bit of your experience, a bit of, well, as much history as you're willing to divulge with us in terms of who you are, your background, and what brings you to sit across from a table.
Yeah,
with
sure.
me today.
Just real high level. I actually started my career right here in Bali. I guess it's been 14 years now, which is pretty wild to think. I don't feel old enough to have a 14-year-old career already, but turns out. But yeah, I made my first pieces of jewelry in Ubud actually. Just, got caught up doing it, just wanted to make something cool. No plan to start a business, and that just kind of snowballed over the years. Since then, I've built several jewelry brands, Clocks and Colors, Vitaly, had a brand called Etah Love, which I rolled into Clocks and Colors. And then just very, very recently, I launched a coffee business. So it's kind of a new venture for me. So starting to kind of venture outside of the world of fashion, but most of my career has been in that world.
And a lot in, we look at your background and what you've achieved, which is, I'm sure you would understate it, but which is an incredible amount, whether we're talking on a financial level or on just a structural business level. But your background is started with creativity, right? In terms of the creative side of things, would that be accurate to say?
No, actually, I went to university for political science to start with. And about 2 or 3 years into studying politics, I started to get really angry and really apathetic. Well, first angry and then apathetic. And I realized this just wasn't a good direction for me. So I was like, okay, I'll finish my degree. But I started studying marketing at the same time. And I actually started working for Red Bull while I was in university, which was really cool. Especially at that time, it's kind of the heyday of Red Bull. This would have been, 16, 17 years ago. And this is when Red Bull was really involved in action sports, which is the world that I grew up around, and, the music world, etc. And I was like, you know what, marketing's pretty cool. Like, I feel like I can do things with this. I can have fun. I can work for brands like a Red Bull, etc. So started studying that, finished university, and I was just super burnt out. Like when I was in university, I had 3 jobs, full-time school. It was just chaos, but I had to do that to stay there. And then when I finished, I was super burnt out, and I was like, I'm just going to take the few dollars I had left on a student credit line and go to Asia. And some nights I just slept on a beach.
So going back even further though, as a child, would I be correct in saying, I think I read somewhere that even in grade 6, you had a prophetic vision that you would one day design jewelry?
Yeah, it was funny. My mom found that, I don't know, it's been quite a while actually, but she sent me a photo of something that I did in grade 6. And it was like a little booklet of all the, what I want to be when I grow up, all that kind of stuff. And there was a line in there and it said, when I grow up, I'm going to design things and sell them to people. And it's funny because obviously that's what ended up happening and I'm obsessed with doing it. But there was definitely a big chunk of my life where I'd pretty much forgotten about that. I was obsessed with Lego when I was a kid. I was really, really creative with Lego. I would enter all these Lego contests, win the Lego contests, get more Lego, and then use that to, and I'd create these crazy things. Like I'd design these cars that could transform into a robot and stuff, just weird stuff. And I was super into that kind of thing. But when I got to high school, I was told not to even go into art class because I was colorblind. So it actually started to push me away from creative worlds. I ended up finding music, which was crazy for me because I was a super hyperactive kid. So I remember when I first tried out a bass guitar, my mom was like, I've never seen you sit still longer. And I sat there for maybe an hour, which is not that crazy, but it was for me. Next thing I knew, I was playing in metal bands and, punk bands and things like that through the rest of high school. But I didn't do anything visual other than really just expressing myself with my style. So I grew up in a small town in Canada for the most part, a couple hours from Toronto. And I mean, it was small town 20 years ago, so the way I was expressing myself was not acceptable. So I got a hard time for it, a lot of bullying through high school, etc. But, I would be wearing super skinny jeans, which were women's jeans at the time because you couldn't get skinny jeans yet for men.
Really?
This is that long ago.
This is 20 years ago? 20,
more than that, because I was in high school, right? So I'm 38 now, so this is probably 22, 23 years ago. I'd be doing crazy things with my hair, massive Liberty spikes, mohawks, painting my nails, like doing eye makeup. Like I was all out in this small little town. So later on in life, when I started working at fashion, my friends weren't surprised. They're like, dude, you've always been like this. You've always expressed yourself. But I didn't realize it. It was just something I did. It wasn't something I really thought about, if that makes sense. And I certainly never thought about later in life. Excuse me. Once I was a teenager and older, I didn't really think of myself as a creative or somebody that would go into a creative world, even though I was extremely creative. It's like I didn't feel comfortable giving myself that label. I knew people who could draw or who could paint. And I thought that they were the artists, they were the creatives.
Was there some kind of rebellion undertone to the way you were dressing, the way you were expressing yourself?
Massive.
Where does that come from?
I was super into punk rock, like proper punk rock, like anarchy kind of punk rock. So for me, it was that kind of like old school gutter punk kind of world and, really fuck the government kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I was all out on that. So that's why I studied politics, because I was all about that kind of idealistic, like political change stuff I wanted to see happen.
Where did that come from?
That's a great question. I honestly don't really know. It certainly didn't come from my family.
Okay.
I had a lot of chaos growing up. And I was a very, very anxious kid. So I don't know, something about that appealed to me. I think something about maybe the rebelliousness, maybe a community of people who felt like they're outsiders. But something made me feel kind of called to that world. I always felt weird. Like I always felt very different than everyone else around, especially in a small town. Once I got to Toronto for school, I started to feel a lot more like I could fit in with people. Like there was more people like me.
Yeah.
That were a lot more expressive, that were interested in things other than just mainstream sports. And then I kind of like started to feel like, oh, you know what? I'm actually not that weird. I just didn't have my people here.
Is this a product of the societal constructs that we have, certainly in small town Canada or small town America or small town anywhere, right? Where we only know what we know when we're growing up in those towns, but we feel, maybe some people feel there's something greater than that. We don't know how to express it. And then you go off to formal education. Do you think formal education helped you bring that out? I mean, you obviously met people that were more like you, but would you do it the same way again?
I don't know. It's one of those things where all roads led to here. So I don't like to say like, hey, I wouldn't do university now. Would I push it on my kids? No, absolutely not. Like when my fiance and I have kids, it's going to be their choice. And I'll happily say to them, hey, look, it would cost you X amount of dollars to go to university. But if you wanted to start a business, I'll give you that exact same amount of money and I'll put it into your first business. I'm pretty convinced that they'd learn a hell of a lot more doing that.
Wow. Can I be your child?
But I think that a lot of it was a symptom of just growing up in a small town and feeling really boxed in and feeling like I didn't have a way to kind of express myself.
Is that where the anxiety came from as well, maybe?
I think the anxiety was a whole bunch of things. I had a chaotic upbringing. I lived in a lot of different places. Like by the time I was leaving for university, I'd probably lived in 15 houses at least.
Wow.
So, that kind of change, especially at a young age, I think it makes us a little bit, tweaky.
So then after university, obviously you didn't have much time between university and starting Vitaly, essentially.
No.
I'm very interested in the formal education side of things and how some of that helped you start that business, or some of it didn't. How do you feel about the correlation between what you learned in terms of marketing degree and how you started and what eventually became your success with Vitaly and clocks?
I'd say some of the marketing stuff helped. We were chatting about something earlier today, cash flow. It's not a fun topic, so I'm not going to dive into it right now, but that would have been something I would have studied in university. And the amount of businesses that I've seen start and fail miserably because they don't know how to make a basic cash flow is pretty mind-blowing, and it's really sad, honestly. So I definitely got some benefit from university. It's interesting though, because, kind of going back to your earlier question, like, did going to the city kind of open you up, or the formal education, et cetera? At least when I was in university, I felt like it was actually trying to really close me in. Like I started getting tattooed the second I turned 18. And as much as tattoos are just completely ubiquitous now, at that point, having tattoos the way I had a full sleeve before I finished university, which doesn't sound like anything today, but that was equivalent to full-blown face tattoos 25 years ago. I had literally, I have professors that still stay in touch that would actually say things in front of the class like, why are you here? Like, you're never going to get a job. You've just ruined your chances at jobs because I had a full sleeve kind of thing, It was just a different time. So I definitely don't think that led to me kind of like spreading my wings, but I did learn things in university that I did take into business. Like I said, like cash flow. Do I think I needed to go to university to learn those skills though? No. I think, a good coach or a good course, et cetera, would be more than sufficient. But they are super important things.
A good AI agent maybe nowadays.
As we were saying earlier today, like today, anything you could possibly need, I think you can just get it from ChatGPT. It's pretty wild.
I'm interested in the driving force that maybe there wasn't a seminal moment where you thought, you came back from Bali and, I could make this business. You would tell the story in a minute, but was it kind of starting a business kind of a fuck you to the system, or a fuck you to the people that told you wouldn't make it, or you wouldn't get a job, or you wouldn't do this, or the bullies that bullied you for being different? Was there part of that in the entrepreneurial side of you?
Probably. I'd say probably all of the above and more. But I think a huge part of it is just the fact that I don't think I would work for anyone very well.
Right.
I don't think I'm particularly cut out to be a employee. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. I'm just not very good at it. I mean, I was always rebellious. I never liked kind of your run-of-the-mill rules. I didn't like rules that seemed arbitrary, or that I absolutely recognize rules where it's to protect somebody, etc. But I just didn't like being told you shouldn't have tattoos because people don't like it. I was like, that's absurd. So going into business and doing my own thing allowed me to continue to express myself however I wanted, to not feel like there was rules, that were just restrictive for no reason. So I think that was a big part of it. But, a big part of my path to business, I think, was inevitable. But a lot of it was also just kind of organic. I didn't plan to start that business, right? I came here because I was burnt out. And honestly, I came to Southeast Asia specifically because I kept having this weird dream. I kept having the same dream, every few nights. I was only sleeping 4 hours a night because I worked so much. And I would have this weird static dream of a Buddha under a Bodhi tree, chalked on a wall. It's really weird. And I don't consider myself particularly spiritual, but I would say that this is in that world. It just felt like I was called to come here. And I came here for 2.5 months, like I said, on basically no money. And I just ended up feeling called to make some stuff. But when I was making that stuff, still, it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to start a business. I brought some home as gifts. That was the plan, but I brought home a bunch. And then I walked into a store on Queen Street, which is kind of one of the main streets in Toronto for like good shops, etc. And I asked the shop owner, I was like, hey, is this something you'd ever put in here? And she bought all the samples on the spot. And that's when I was like, oh, hey, maybe I actually have a business. So I took the last little bit I had on a credit line and ordered more inventory, and kind of started that dream. But initially I was like, hey, I'll just pay for another backpacking trip. So you can see like it wasn't like this vision of like, oh, I'm going to do this big thing and it's a fuck you to the system and blah, blah, blah. Like initially it was just like, hey, maybe I could backpack again. That'd be cool.
And the curiosity led you to grow and find a business partner, and tell us how it went from backpacking trip to actually a business.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it was really organic. So my business partner joined in probably 6 months after my first kind of round of inventory. But basically what happened was I had a few grand left after that trip on my student credit line. And I messaged the guy that made the initial round of rings for me, which were these wood 2-finger rings. And I just said, hey, like make me as many as you can make for this money and send them. And I was just kind of all in, moved into my mom's basement. And I was like, hey, like maybe I can just kind of sling these like effectively like out of a backpack. And then people started buying them. Like I said, that one store on Queen Street bought them. So I walked into other stores and they bought them too. And I was like, oh, okay. There's probably something here. And after a few months, I started to realize like, okay, there's a potential to scale this a bit at least, but I don't have enough money. Like the money's not, it's, what we talked about earlier, cash flow, right? So I needed more cash to keep things moving without having massive gaps between having inventory. So I was talking to my now business partner, Jason, who was my roommate at the time. And I was just saying, hey, like, I think I'm going to need more money. Like, I don't know if I have to go raise money or what I should do. And he was like, well, I've seen this working pretty well and I've got some money, like I'll throw in some cash. And it took about 3 months for me to take the money from him because I'd had a small business in university running these snowboarding trips with a friend. And we've actually since reconnected, but it destroyed our friendship for a long time.
Right.
It just didn't work out. And one person was blamed kind of thing. Just like young business stuff, just kind of early mistakes. And I was like, I don't want to start working with a close friend again and then risk that friendship. And after a few months of us kind of chatting about it and realizing like how kind of pragmatic we can be about things and that we're good at talking through things, I was like, okay, I'll take that little bit of money, but it was just going to be an investment initially. Like he wasn't joining on, but he put 10 grand that he had, which was pretty much all his money. And after a couple months, he was like, hey, you need help. And he started helping. And at the time he was a professional poker player and a helicopter pilot. And within like a year, he was just full-time on Vitaly as well. So
where would you say, I mean, there's fully bootstrapped, right? You didn't take investors at that time?
So we did. So
oh, you did.
Tiny though, right? Like to us, it was a crazy amount. So we ended up raising 58,000 Canadian. So basically we did our cash flow. We were always really hardcore about that kind of stuff. And we looked at it and we're like, okay, we have enough runway for maybe 3 months before Jason needs to like actually start working again, because we couldn't take any real salary out of it yet. So he was like, okay, well then we have 3 months to raise the money. And basically we got to like effectively the full 3 months. And he actually flew out west to West Coast Canada to start flying helicopters again. Cause we'd kind of like, we're like, we tried, we gave it a good shot, but we didn't get any money. And one of my friend's dads he'd been like a CEO for one of the Johnson & Johnson brands, like really successful guy. He's like, you know what? You guys are hard workers. I believe in you. He put in 5 grand. As soon as he put in the 5 grand, I called everyone else that was kind of interested. And I was like, hey, we just got an ex-CEO from Johnson & Johnson. Like he's put in money. Are you sure you don't want to put in money? And almost every other person that was even slightly interested immediately ponied up. And within like 48 hours, I had like 58 grand. It was wild. I actually remember the like, I don't know if the right word would be catharsis, but like the extreme release I had. It was such a massive relief. I actually sat down and cried, which like I never cry. And it was even crazier because it was like a happiness cry, but it was like just also this just huge weight that had been lifted. I was like, oh, we can do this. We can keep going, And, a couple of days later, Jason got on a plane, flew back and we started rolling. But aside from that, we've just bootstrapped the business. So it was at like 58 grand. And if I told you the valuation that those people came in at, they've done very well for themselves.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, I'm sure. Are they still part of the business?
Several of them, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Some of them are just diehard. They're like,
Yeah.
we're just like diamond hands kind
They're
of
just
thing,
with you for the, yeah, cool.
But some people have sold off pieces or whatever and done really well. But I mean, that's a long time ago, right? So you'd hope for a decent return at this point too. And it started slow, like they weren't in for the short haul because, the business was tiny. Like our first year, I think we did 14,000. And I think our second year was 40,000, like of real years, like tiny.
Revenue, US dollars. Yeah.
Revenue, Canadian dollars.
Canadian dollars.
Which at the time were pretty much par with the US.
Yeah.
But it's changed a lot.
Yeah. I mean, just, I can kind of resonate with that emotional state of essentially someone believing in you, right? It's believing in you so much they'll actually put some of their own money down the table. And then I'm sure that elation quickly turns to, oh, fuck, like, oh, we've got to do this now.
Yeah, big time. And I took that really, really seriously. And, I didn't grow up with any money, like that's for sure. And so $58,000 to us was an insane amount, And so we took it super, super seriously. We didn't take any money from anyone we were really close to. And I still don't think I would do that just because I already find it to be kind of overwhelming. So I think if I was taking it like, from my mom or, like close friends, etc. I know I've heard people say that they like doing that because it puts the pressure on them to like really perform. I don't think I need to add pressure. Like, I think that my poor nervous system is already just decimated. Like the last thing I need to do is add more.
So, there's a point to kind of going through the genesis side of your story, but I'm really interested in perseverance, right? We can look at your quote unquote success in terms of black and white metrics, right? It's easy to do that. I want you to give me a bit more of a subjective, almost retrospective view of what the last 14 years has meant to you. But I want to really understand what points you were really struggling, that you had the really tough decision of, right, there's still a tiny little glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. We want to persevere it, or you have this choice, which I know a lot of people in business, also creatives, have, right? They seem to be either stuck in the mud or churning. Year 2, 40,000 revenue. Were you thinking at that point, like, are we actually going to make anything of this? How do we figure out perseverance and scale?
Yeah, it's funny. That reminds me of a story, actually. We were probably about 2.5 years in, and, I did well in school. And like I said, I had 3 jobs through school, one of which was a teaching assistant, which I shouldn't have even had because I was undergrad. But, I did well and finished, honors, all that kind of crap, somehow. But, so because of that, I had really good job prospects. And one of my closest friends, who's still one of my closest friends, he'll be I'm doing 2 best men in my wedding. He'll be one of them. He sat me down, and this is kind of a running joke now because he sat me down and he was like, Shane, like, you guys did whatever, 40,000 in sales. He's like, you're making nothing. You're living off of macaroni and like super cheap coffee. He's like, maybe you should consider getting a real job. And like, and I remember looking at him and I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, yeah, like, like this is crazy. Like, what are you doing here? And I was like, dude, last year we did 14,000. This year the next year we did 40,000. The next year we're going to do 160,000. Like, I was like, I know that doesn't look great, but you can't see the light at the end of that tunnel because I can, like, I was like, those are meaningful multiples. And I know that it's small now, but I don't need a lot of money right now. And if I do this for 3 or 4 more years and I can even just have, 2 or 3x every single year, we're going to be into the multi-millions within a few years. And that's exactly what we did. But I do remember when he sat me down, presenting a really confident kind of view to him, like, no, I'm good. But of course, walking away from that being like, shit, like, am I being an idiot here, But I remember saying to myself, like, at that point, I didn't need much. And I will, I say this to people often, like, it is so much easier to start a business when you're young, because even things like your friends aren't making much money yet either. Like, if they have a corporate job or something, they're not going to be making that much that you're like, oh shit, I can't do anything with any of my friends. Everyone's kind of broke together. I do think it's a lot harder. I do respect people for starting businesses much later in life because you're like, okay, I have real responsibilities now. I still want to like be able to do things with my family, my friends, etc., and kind of keep up, right? But I didn't feel any kind of desperation at that age. So I was like, if I'm going to do this, it's now. And it was funny because we had very little money and we paid ourselves next to nothing. We paid ourselves $2,000 a month for the first 3 years, I think. So that's what we were living on in downtown Toronto, which is insane. But we got really, really good at being scrappy, which ended up being super valuable for us later on. And one of the best things we got like kind of really well versed in was trading things. So we just used our product as currency. So there wasn't like a club or a concert, et cetera, that we couldn't go to by just trading our products, which was amazing.
Really?
Yeah.
So you'd pay
really
for
fun.
tickets with the jewelry, basically.
Yeah, you went to any place that we would like to go on weekends. All the bouncers, all the bartenders, everything, they're all wearing our product, which ended up kind of being a marketing strategy for us anyway.
Yeah.
But lots of lessons learned there. But yeah, I mean, it was tough. And I mean, there were many, many times where we thought we were done also, and so, going back to what you're talking about with perseverance, it's everything. Like intelligence is important, sure. Maybe some education, sure. But like, if you don't have grit, like I have Sisu tattooed on my wrist as kind of a reminder. It's another word for grit. You're done. Like you have to just keep pushing through. And we had so many moments where we were like, there's no way we can survive this. And we just sat down and kind of did everything we could to find the silver lining and to kind of like spin it to make it work. And we always managed to. But I can think of so many times where I thought we were done.
Give me some kind of top high level lessons you might be able to impart from that grit. We're talking like cash flow, obviously. Learn how to look after your cash and future forecast. Learn how to market, sell, brand, like all of these big kind of cliche terms, but they're super important. I'm guessing you had a marketing degree, so you had that behind you, but the rest you're just kind of spitballing it.
There's a million lessons that can come from all of that. The first one would be, I said this to you earlier, but I wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't for my partner. And he wouldn't be where he is if it wasn't for me. Find a partner that complements you. I never, ever, ever see really strong businesses where it's just one person. Like you need a partner. And typically you're going to have one person that's kind of more visionary, and you're going to have somebody who's really good at executing that day and getting things done. My partner gets things done. Like he will make sure that if I give him the vision, that it gets done, and he's amazing at it. He's a genius for sure. He's way, way, way smarter than I am. But he doesn't bring that kind of like vision to the table. So because of his kind of careful planning and smart execution of things and staying on top of cash flow, things like that, we've gotten out of many hairy positions. So for example, we used to do clothing for Vitaly. We had a full apparel line, and we had one season. It was our biggest clothing season yet. We had all these pre-booked orders from stores, etc. And it was a huge part of the business at that point, like bigger than the jewelry side of the business. And we had all the clothing arrive on boat from, so it took like 6 months to get this clothing. And we had 100% fail rate. Like not a single garment was sellable. So this was, you can imagine, just devastating. I remember I found out the day that I started a week-long vacation with my family. And I'd never even really done a family vacation like this, like took my grandma to Mexico, that kind of thing. I was the most miserable human you can imagine for a week, like, because I thought my business was done.
Yeah.
But it survived, and I accredit that survival probably more than anything to Jason's smart kind of use of funds. Like he was always just really, really careful to make sure that we still had a nest egg. He knew like when our cash flow was going to kind of be safe again, et cetera. And we were able to barely scrape through that, but we managed to. And, within 6 months, we were kind of back and rolling properly.
What if you're an individual creative in that respect? Maybe you don't have a partner, but you might be able to rely on someone else or a mentor or even AI these days to kind of give you that springboard. Is that
so
too much?
I was going to say, I'd say make AI your partner. Like you can literally train it to be what you need, right? So you can say, hey, my skill set is creative and I want to be creative. And you can prompt it and say, actually, there's a really great book. It's called Rocket Fuel. It's a really quick, simple read. But it kind of breaks down the two critical roles in starting a company. One of those roles is visionary, and the other role is integrator. I think that's the word they use. But effectively, it's pretty self-explanatory, but, one person is that kind of more CEO mind. They're thinking the big picture, the vision, the direction, or the creative director mind. And then the other person is more like the operational mind and kind of figuring out like, how do we get things done today? If you're not good at that side of things, you can train ChatGPT. The challenge is some of that stuff just has to get done.
Yeah.
So some of
Actually
it's
get done.
Yeah, some of it's like actually like calling places or like filling out paperwork, things like that. But and obviously GPT is not doing all of that stuff yet. I mean, it might not be that long. But you can have it kind of walk you through and teach you a lot of that stuff. And maybe GPT is not the best thing for cash flow, but I'd be shocked if it couldn't tell you an AI that's already built that is perfect for that. So, I think more than anything, the most important thing is humility, and recognizing like what your strengths are, and then seeking out the kind of other side of that. Because most people are so focused on what their strengths are that they don't acknowledge that the other part's still super important. So I think right now AI is my suggestion. Just get on there. If you're just a pure creative, nothing wrong with that, but find your other half with AI.
Yeah, we've talked about this a lot actually, but I think it's super important for people to understand that there, even if they're, an individual photographer, hobbyist who might want to give up their 9 to 5 and take it full time. But if I think moving into the future, we're at the start of an AI revolution. If you don't know, you get left behind pretty fast because the whole world will be using it or integrate it into their businesses or systems, whether they're a mom and pop shop or a multi-billion-dollar brand, right? Imminently. And it's gonna move so fast. We don't know how to learn how to utilize it for whatever we want it to do, which it can either do now or definitely will be able to do within 1 or 2 years.
Yeah.
I think it's a mandatory skill to learn, and you won't learn anywhere really other than maybe itself, ChatGPT itself or YouTube, right?
Yeah.
Because they're not going to teach. We're talking about formal education. It takes so long to get these things, even the legislation, even governments can't keep up with AI because the bureaucracy is so slow moving. So it's really down to yourself at the end of the day. But it's vital.
It's super vital. And ironically, I think a lot of the people that are most resistant to it have the most to gain from it. I actually think that for people who are, for example, a pure creative, there's never been a better time for them. I know that a lot of those jobs are going to be wiped out and people might be saying, what the hell are you talking about? But if you have a vision and you want to do something, AI can help you get there in a way that you've never had before. Like you would have to learn so much, or you'd have to bring in a partner, but you don't necessarily have to do that anymore.
Or investors, right?
Or investors, exactly. I mean, you still might need those investors, but it's an interesting time where somebody who maybe isn't as skilled in business, et cetera, can actually make those things happen pretty quickly still. Like the things that I've been able to do with it over the last, even just a couple months, it's mind blowing. Like the efficiency that it's created for what I do as a creative is staggering, and it's still my vision. And the reason I'm able to do it as well as I can with AI is because I'm a creative, and it's because I have a vision and I can guide it and I can give it that direction, right? Like if you're a creative director, one of your strongest skill sets, and this is something that I don't think gets talked about enough, is the kind of the difference between an art director and a creative director. To me, there's a really massive one, which is that creative directors are very good at delegating. They create a vision, but art directors can often do that too. But art directors often aren't quite ready or skilled enough to step into the creative director role, which is more of a management role. So if you are a creative director, you are so set when you have a tool like AI because you already know how to delegate. Same for if you're a CEO mind. Like if you're somebody who's already used to delegating like crazy, you take that skill and you apply that to AI because you're used to prompting people through words every single day to get things done.
Yeah, good point.
It's pretty powerful.
Yeah. So let's pull out Clocks and Colors is arguably my favorite brand. It is my favorite brand of yours. It's epic. And we could talk all day about how that exudes the brand that you want it to exude. I'm going to talk about branding in a minute, but when you talk about art director and creative director, tell us like on a daily, what are the real tangible differences that you would fit those two roles into Clocks? What would they be doing?
I would be giving the big picture direction
as creative director,
which is the function I still kind of do as. So I stepped down as CEO about 2 years ago, after 12 years. and decided I just wanted to do purely creative stuff. So as creative director for Clocks and Colors, the biggest thing that I'm doing is providing the vision and the direction, and making sure that we have a cohesive identity. I have an amazing team. My art director, Cass, she's an absolute weapon, and like anything I say, she can execute. So she's really out there executing. I'm the one that's making sure that she has something to execute, essentially.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, I want to talk about branding, because I think for me, from the outside of it, one of, I could be completely wrong, but one of the biggest secrets to your success, certainly with someone like a brand like Clocks and Colors or Vitaly, is the branding. And what I've read about you explaining it before, in addition to the conversations we've had, we talk about archetypes, but the thing that really hit home with me is not trying to appeal to everyone. Right?
Yeah.
Tell us the importance of finding that archetype and just zoning in on it.
I mean, it's worked for me. I don't know that that's always the best thing. I've seen a lot of people do really well with these kind of more broad, kind of brands and identities, and they tend to
really,
if you're going to build a massive brand, it's pretty tough to be really niche.
Yeah.
But I like working in niches, and the reason I like working in niches is because I think it's more authentic. So for me, authenticity has always been super important. And I've had people, who have no idea who I am, like, troll me and things like that, and say like, oh, he's a poser for this or that. And I'm like, I've played in metal bands since I was 15. Like, this is actually my world and my identity. And so for me, building Clocks and Colors was pretty easy because I just stayed focused on a lane that I knew and that I loved, so I always loved tattoo culture. I loved, metal and punk and different forms of rock. I always dreamt about motorcycle culture until finally I could get one. But it was a world that I always liked. I actually liked barbershop culture and kind of just, all the rock and roll fashion and aesthetics. And so, building the brand in that niche was kind of more self-serving than anything. It wasn't like, oh, this is a strategic business choice. It was more like, it's where I want to be. And I played in bands when I was younger, but I stopped playing pretty much as soon as I started university. Started again a few years ago and super into it now. But what I realized was I really missed that world and I wanted a connection to it. So I built Clocks and Colors specifically to live there. And now I get to work with all these artists that I've looked up to and admire, and many of them I call friends now, which is pretty cool.
There's almost like the archetype was yourself, right?
It was.
The person you're building, and this is a good lesson for any creative, is to align that authenticity with what you're putting out there, right? So if you're designing for, if you've chosen an ICP, avatar, archetype, whatever you want to call it, that's better be you, because you know how to talk to it. You know how to talk to it. You know what it wants. And that's always a good starting point.
I think so. I mean, I don't know if it works for everybody. This isn't me trying to give advice, but for me, whenever I did anything, whenever I got kind of caught up in the business and started doing product, for example, that I thought, oh, this will sell, instead of, oh, I love this, it didn't work. It didn't work. Even when I was like, this will for sure sell, but I don't love it, it failed. And that was a huge, huge lesson for me. So these days we have a thing, and I didn't invent this, but we use it all the time. If it's not a fuck yeah, it's a fuck no. And I look at things and I'm like, do I think that's a fuck yeah? And sometimes it's a soft fuck yeah, and sometimes it's a hard fuck yeah, but it's at least got to be, yeah, this is sick, and that tends to work out for us. I stepped away for about a year, and a lot of the product started being created more for the perspective or for the purpose of just trying to sell. So, one of the things that was done was they took a lot of the pieces and just changed the stones. It's like, this is a bestseller, let's add a different stone, things like that. And we kind of went off a cliff, so again, it was an example of, this isn't being done for the right reasons. And I don't know, maybe people can kind of smell it. They can sense it. I don't know what it is, but for me, it's definitely worked to be authentic. The Vitaly brand was another side of my identity, early days, like call it for the first 7 or 8 years. So the very first hire we made was Zach Vitiello. He was our creative director for over 10 years. He now is, I think, the global brand director for Nike apparel, which is insane, like super cool. When he told us that he got that job, I was just proud. I was like so upset to be losing him, but also just so proud of him. He's just insanely talented. But we kind of co-created, directed Vitaly for the first 7 or 8 years. And then he realized, look, like it's time to refresh this and kind of bring it into a modern world because it's not us anymore. And he was really good at doing that. So Vitaly has a very, very different identity than it did, many years ago, when it was kind of more of a reflection of us. But I find it hard to do that. I find it hard to build in a world that's not my world.
Yeah. And what a lot of this is testing though, right? A lot of it is just testing, experimentation. As long as it's coming through from the right place and the right source, a lot of it's not going to work anyway. But that's kind of the second lesson to branding and creating is you've got to try stuff, but you've got to be fast enough to know when something doesn't work, but also then get the next thing out.
Yeah, most stuff fails. I mean, like for clocks, we release probably about 100 pieces a year. And I would say
insane.
Of the 100 pieces, probably 5 do well. And, maybe 2 per year are like, this is a killer, And for us, at the end of the day, those 2 pay the bills, even though we release 100. So yeah, there's a lot of testing. But regardless of those 100, I like them all. It's just I don't have a crystal ball, like you just really never know what's going to actually be the one that for whatever reason appeals to a ton of people. And we've had certain pieces that's just, you're like, okay, I guess this is a blockbuster. I have no idea why. It's cool, but this one's also cool. So
that's kind of scary and comforting at the same time. Like even with 14, 15 years in the business, it's still a lot of trial and error.
Yeah, I always say this to my team. I'm like, look, you can say that I'm arrogant. I have the best instincts of anyone on our team, and I've been honing them for 14 years. They're still not great. Like it's kind of like being a professional gambler where, maybe you can beat the house, but you're only winning by 1% or 2%. Like that's the edge I probably have. It's not significant. It's just enough that when you're doing 100 pieces a year, we'll find some winners.
Yeah. And then you've got to deal with external factors that come your way all the time, whether it's COVID or tariffs.
That's a whole other thing. Honestly, the last 4 years have been as close to like a joke as you could ever imagine. Like it's just been one after the other of such extreme things that you're like, this is absurd. Like the fact that we're still going is unbelievable, because it's just kicked and then kicked well down over and over and over again. Whether it's COVID or the changes with the iOS 14 update or the recent tariffs, or it's been so many things. It's just laughable. But, again, I credit so much of this to Jason as well. Like, we've always been really, not strategic, but, I guess cautious, like we don't spend all our money. We don't dividend out everything, et cetera. We always kind of keep a safety net, and that safety net has saved us many times.
Where has the fulfillment come from over the last 14 years?
The honest truth is it's oscillated between where I'm feeling fulfilled and where I'm not. And generally I start to feel not fulfilled when I slide too much into my business brain.
Okay.
So, we've talked about this before, but I see myself as very center-brained. And I think that that's the right place to be for a CEO of a creative company, because you have a bit of business and a bit of creative. And I'm not amazing at either of them. I can just speak both languages, so I can translate and I can connect to the departments, et cetera. And that's kind of like my, I guess you could say, superpower. But what I've found is that sometimes, maybe because of what's going on in the world, like COVID or whatever, it forces my brain into like the damage control mode all the time. And I'm thinking constantly about the business and trying to, save it, et cetera. And typically when I land there, I find it really hard to be really creative and to feel good about what I'm creating. It just kind of feels like survival mode. So, like I'm sure most creatives know, like when you're like hyper stressed out and you need an idea. I mean, some people can work in that state, but most people are like block, and then you go for a run or you go for a long walk or something and you're not thinking about it anymore at all. And then all of a sudden the idea comes. That's typically how it is for me too. Is I have my best ideas when I'm not in a state of like fight or flight.
Yeah, sympathetic nervous system kicking off, right?
Exactly. So, and when I'm creating something that I'm like actually excited about, that's the fulfillment. Like that's when I feel really good. So, for example, we just released a collection with my friend JJ. He's the singer of Kaleo, and I love everything we did there. Like, and I felt exactly how I felt in the early days of starting the business. Like the same, seeing the products and just being like, this is fucking amazing. Like, this is a sick product, over and over and over again. Like, the collection is so strong. And then the content that we created around it, the storytelling, we worked with the photographer, and he just did the photography, but my friend Carlos Lang, he's based out of Mexico. We went to his family home, which is like this magical place. And it was just such a good vibe. And that was it. Like, being able to work with other cool creatives and everybody vibing from it and buzzing and everybody excited about the products, that is where I get the fulfillment. But it can honestly be hard to always be there.
Yeah.
Because like I said, when you're in fight or flight, you're not there anymore.
Yeah. Well, what kind of practices do you utilize to try and stay in that healthy place as much as possible, or at least stay grounded? I mean, it must be, you rise to the top and you create a huge business, but you're still having normal pressures of daily, personal, mindset life. How do you kind of stay just normal and sane?
I don't. I think I'm an extremely anxious person, actually. And I don't like to say that. I don't want to identify as that, but it's kind of just reality. Really grateful that I have a very chilled out, like, stable fiance, because she helps a lot. But funny enough, my new business is a coffee business focused on low caffeine and decaf. And that's because I am anxious and I do struggle to kind of stay chill and calm, but I am obsessed with coffee. So I created this coffee brand specifically to make sure that I enjoy it without stacking in caffeine, because it's not helping me at all. But I do a lot of the kind of, like, quote unquote, like, right things to do, normal things. Like, I journal a lot. I meditate when I can. My meditation's more just kind of simple breath work, go for walks, etc. But like, the truth is like, when my anxiety's high, those things, maybe they take this a speck of the edge off, but yeah, I mean, I'm still there. I have not perfected this, so I can't give a lot of advice on it.
Was this the kind of the anxiety of being a CEO? Was this, much of the decision to essentially step down from that role?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I think 99% of my anxiety came from being CEO, not creative director. That's why I stepped into the creative role. I'm still a majority owner, though. My livelihood depends on this business, so I still feel it really extremely. Yeah. But when I'm just doing the creative stuff, I'm golden. I love it. It fires me up. Nobody gets more excited to see new products than I do still. After 14 years, like, when samples come in, I'm like, yes, let's see, I'm still fueled by that, and it does fulfill me. It does excite me. What doesn't is every new thing that kicks us when we're down and we're like, okay, how are we surviving next year? Like, that's the stuff that, can be challenging.
Yeah, I bet. Do you ever feel like your voice gets diluted? And I don't mean your voice in terms of your directive voice, but in terms of your creativity voice. And, I know you do a lot of collaborations. It might be such an incredible part of how you grow a brand like this. But do you ever feel that, because this is very applicable to the individuals out there who might be watching and listening to this, who don't have a big brand or don't want to, create a big lifestyle brand or whatever it might be, just want to kind of monetize their skill, but are afraid of diluting that voice or that skill because money gets in the way. And I think this comes down to a lot of business skills or business savvy that people may not have or may be fearful of learning. Because as soon as you step into the other side of your brain, the business side of the brain, it's almost like you leave that creative, you're almost like cheating on that creative side of you. Do you feel like, I know you're quite center brain, but you can't have, it's very difficult to balance both at the same time.
It's unbelievably difficult. That's, I think, a big part of why my nervous system is as fried as it is, because I did it for 12 years, right?
Yeah.
And I still kind of do it. Like, I'm really grateful my business partner stepped in and, he's definitely steering and leading the ship now. And he takes a lot of that weight off. But again, as a, major owner in the business, like, it's impossible to be completely removed from that. Yeah, it's hard to separate the two for sure. To kind of answer the earlier part of that though, I don't really feel like my voice gets diluted. I feel like it actually gets, if anything, it's like one person yelling in a room is loud. 5 people yelling in the room is a hell of a lot louder. And that's how I feel with my team. Like, my creative team takes my voice and makes it way louder.
Okay.
and I think that that's what a good team is. Like they don't try to change it. They don't try to like create their own thing, like kind of going against me. We work together and we kind of build that vision. And I think they show a lot of trust in me, which is great. I've had challenges in the past as CEO where it felt like I was always being questioned and challenged on my decisions. And after enough years, that became exhausting. Like I got really tired of just having to kind of like fight for what I knew or what I at least believed was the right thing. But when it comes to the creative side of things, I feel really grateful that way. Like I don't feel like I've had to fight with my team ever. My team is really trusting and I still have almost 100% control of product. I mean, I really do have 100% control of product, and that's the thing I'm most excited about. Like, and when I say product, I mean just the tangible, physical stuff that we make, like the rings, the sunglasses, whatever it might be. My team just lets me do that completely. So yeah, I feel like my voice is much louder because I have a team.
Yeah, that's awesome. Because I think as soon as you start trying to get paid for what you create, it just muddies the waters, right? And then you can easily start chasing the money. And if someone's in charge of that money, which is essentially a client or a customer or an investor, it's very easy to then compromise on your beliefs or your creative integrity, right? So I think it's really important to understand that, or at least know that, have that belief that there's an audience for everyone. And this is the biggest inspiration for me with you is, understanding who you are and what you want to see out there in terms of jewelry. Clocks is a perfect example. And then going to make that and knowing that archetype will always be there. There's an audience for everyone, right? There's a market for everything. You've got to not let all the noise get in the way of it.
Yep. I will say though that there's some nuance to that. So let me ask you this. Do you consider yourself a artist or a designer or photographer?
I mean, romantically, I'd like to say artist because I don't just do photography, I think, but I try and be more of an artist than just photographer, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, no, for sure. So I've thought about this question a lot. I like thinking about it. Like I like thinking about, for example, the difference between what's a movie and what's a film, and I like to try to define those kinds of things. So for me, there's a huge difference between an artist and a designer. An artist is creating something because, in my mind, because they're compelled to do it. They're not doing it for any outcome other than for themselves. They have to do it. A designer still wants an outcome. A designer still has an objective in mind. So I'm a designer. So am I creative? Yes. Do I have an artistic side of myself? Yes. But I don't consider myself an artist. I consider myself a designer. So I still have always approached creating things from the perspective of like selling. There's still authenticity attached to it. I have to like it. I have to feel good about it, the way that an artist does as well. But I also am not going to create something if I think there's zero chance of selling it. Does that make sense? So I think that one thing that I see happen is a lot of people try to be artists and build a business, and they're not the same thing. And there's probably people who want to skewer me for saying this and, oh, that's just not authentic and blah, blah, blah. I'm sorry. I've been doing it for 14 years and it's worked, like what I've seen over and over again though, is a lot of people, they try to turn things into art projects, and that's a different thing. And I respect that. I have so much respect for artists. But if you can't separate that you're creating something to be sold and creating something to be like seen, you're going to have a problem.
Yeah. I mean, that's a completely different argument altogether. There are many artists or creatives that do, and I'm going to jump on top of what you're saying because it really, really, really depends on what your goal is and what you're doing it for, right? Many people are doing things to be seen these days.
Yeah.
And that never lasts, right? And if it does, it ends in tears or it gets handed over to someone else, or you completely lose your identity of who you are when you first started it, right? So I think it really, really depends on, everyone's different. It depends on what you're doing this for. And I really think about the individual out there that's, some of my clients as well, they struggle so much with making the jump, right? Because they think it's either art or it's job, right? It's either art or business.
Yep.
And I think these words really get conflated with the wrong things. You know, you can be an artist and you can pay the bills every month, right? Whether you can make a multi-million-dollar business by just being that starving artist, there's almost cognitive dissonance in that. So I think this is where partnerships come in, some business skills, maybe some compromise along the way. I see so many artists that start one way and then they go down almost the sellout route. You know, they get a lot of stick for being sellouts. They're not. They just enjoy maybe the business side and working with clients, getting paid for what they do. So I think it really does depend. But underneath all of this is your intention.
That's what I think. And I mean, look, you know, before I get skewered for this, there are exceptions. Like I've met many actual artists that are making incredible amounts of money and they're just doing exactly what they want to do. It happens. I just don't think it happens most of the time. And I'm not one of those. Like I'm still a designer. You know?
Yeah, I mean, why does an artist like one of the most popular singers or bands these days, why do they tour so much, right?
Yeah.
It's not because they love touring one city after another day in, day out. Yeah, they might love it initially, or they might love touring per se, but they're exhausted. They're not living, they don't enjoy the life in that moment.
Yeah.
Obviously a sweeping generalization.
Again,
but,
yeah, there's probably an exception.
Of course.
But yeah.
You know, if you just do a gig once a week, then you're going to love it. But once you start having commercial pressures in any job, right? Once you have things break along the way. So it's, it's really great to sit across from someone who's felt that pendulum swing all the time and managed to navigate a way through it without, I guess, breaking anything in the meantime.
Yeah, yet to be determined.
Yeah. What does the future look like for you? With the brand or with new stuff coming up? Because whenever we talk, you've created something new, which is fantastic. And tell us what this chapter of your life looks like over the next few years.
It's an interesting chapter right now because I've gotten the brand and the company to a point where it's not even close to a full-time job for me. Like I can give the oversight, the direction that I need, and I have such a strong team that they can execute it. So I've had a lot of time on my hands to think and kind of figure out what I want to do next. And, you know, one of the things is I launched this coffee brand. But, you know, I've got dozens of other ideas. Some of them are writing, some of them are, you know, more in fashion, but maybe getting back into apparel. But exactly what I'm going to put my energy into in the next little bit, I don't know. I think I want to just kind of start doing things and then see what I want to keep doing, you know?
How does mental health play into that? Is it now more of a priority?
It's been interesting. I've spent a lot of incredible amount of energy over the last, you know, probably 2 or 3 years on mental health, and especially the last year and a half. And I think that, you know, because the company's gotten to a point and because I stepped down as CEO and I'm at a point now where I don't need to work, you know, 50, 60 hours minimum a week, I have a lot of time with my thoughts, and that's not always a good thing. But I think it was time, you know, and now, so, you know, I've been doing that work, and it's been a lot. But I think I'm kind of at a point now where spending any more time just with those thoughts is probably not healthy. I think it's time to do things, you know, and my mental health is always best when I'm producing, you know, like if I feel like I'm actually creating something of value or something that I like, I feel better, you know, like if I'm sitting around a lot, I get really anxious. I get like annoyed at myself, like that kind of stuff, you know, so.
It's like a drug, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Being in that flow state of creating something.
Yeah. And I think I was saying this to you before, but I'm quite addicted to tangible things, you know, unfortunately, because
me too, yeah.
Tangible products are really frustrating businesses. But I love getting samples of new things, you know, like I'm constantly thinking about doing clothing again because receiving fresh clothing samples is a high, you know, like, and I'm hooked on it. I don't think I could get that same high from just, you know, I don't know, making a course or writing something. Not that there's anything wrong with that, or creating a software. I'm just addicted to
day
the
trading
thing, you know, exactly. Like we were talking about this the other day, actually. I wish I cared more about money in that way, so that I could spend any amount of time and effort on like investing in investments. But I just immediately get bored. Like it just makes me kind of
can't feel it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But as soon as I start thinking about like, oh, like I could make this really cool collection of clothing, and all of a sudden the business comes to mind too, and I get excited. So the path of most resistance, but it's the one I like.
What would you, this is a big question, I'm not sure if you can answer it, but let's say let's say the coffee business, if you were going to pour everything into that to make it a big business, which I think knowing the brand that you've created, I think it's going to take off. But what would you do differently that you might have made a mistake doing with Compound?
I started Compound 14 years ago. So the short answer would be hundreds, if not thousands of things differently.
Give me some big stuff.
One of the things I would do is honestly, and this might sound rude or something, but I'd keep my team as small as humanly possible. I've just always worked best that way. Like I like knowing everyone. I like feeling close to my team. And I think that with the tools that are out there today, you can build something really big, really meaningful with a really small team anyway. I would rather have a small team that feels super appreciated, that's paid well, where we're all working hard together, than have some big distributed team with layers of management and politics and things like that. Because that's probably the number one thing that burnt me out. So I would do that differently for sure. But I don't know, this coffee business is interesting because it's such a different business, right? Like with Compound, between Vitaly and Clocks, we're rolling out 200 new products a year minimum. With the coffee business, it'll be 8 SKUs at any given time. Versus right now in market, we might have 2,800 SKUs on our website. It's just a mind-blowingly different business. And I don't really know what to do with it. But I was chatting with Finn about this. I was explaining that, one of my dreams is to build something like this coffee business, sell it in 3 to 5 years for a meaningful amount of money. Not because I have any ambition for anything more than I already have. I literally I'm fine because I grew up with little, I'm happy with my guitar collection and a good motorcycle, So it's not about that. It's that I have so many ideas, and the thought of having a good chunk of cash where I could be like, okay, cool. I'm going to find people that I respect and trust and be like, okay, here's $1 million, take this idea, run with it. Here's $1 million, take this idea and run with it. That would be the most exciting thing I could possibly do because the ideas are endless. This is going to sound ridiculous. I'm saying this on a podcast too, but Liquid Death is the craziest business that I've watched blow up, of which I had the identical idea before
Really?
I ever saw it. Yeah. Actually, a friend of mine and I came up with it together years ago in a hotel room. Because we were both kind of done with drinking at the time. We're like, I'm sick of drinking, but we like going out to these concerts and stuff. And we literally, it wasn't going to be just basic water. We were like, let's just do sparkling water, but make the can look badass so it looks like you're holding a beer. And we had that before Liquid Death, and I'm sure many other people had the same idea. They didn't do it though. And very few companies have ever executed anything as well as Liquid Death has. Their marketing is absolute genius. So I'm not going to say I could have done what they've done, but it's just an example of the dozens of ideas I've had in the last even couple of years kind of thing that I'd love to just be like, try it.
You say the coffee side of it is very different, but doesn't it mostly just come down to marketing and branding anyway?
It does, but okay, so this is the thing I'm most excited about with the coffee business, and it's a massive, massive difference. The coffee business solves an actual problem, right? When I create ads for this coffee business, I have 1 million ways to get the message out, which is that this is great coffee that's not going to make you anxious. And that is a really powerful message. I've never had that before. I've always been selling kind of more of a lifestyle, a vision, and identity. And that's a thing. And it's important to people. We all want to express ourselves, and we all want to feel part of a tribe, and we want to demonstrate that we kind of live within this certain universe, et cetera. And I'm glad that I've been able to provide that. But from a marketing perspective, it's actually pretty complicated, other than just showing it visually or with a cool video that makes somebody feel like, oh, that's cool or aspirational. But try to really put words into that. And it's hard, and it can be done. And there's people probably sitting here going, yeah, I can do it for you. And it's okay, but is it going to really resonate? Is it going to really create conversions from ads, et cetera? I mean, we're still struggling with that every single day. But when it comes to All Day, I've got thousands of ideas.
All Day is the coffee brand.
All Day, yeah, yep. It's All Day Coffee. It's actually going to be rebranding within the next couple of months. So, but as of right now, it's called All Day, and it solves a real problem. It solves a problem that I needed solved, and I figured I'm probably not alone And then I'd go to a group of, 5 people, and there was always at least one person that wanted the product, and I was like, okay, this is a real problem.
Do you think your anxiety is a bit of a superpower though?
At times.
Gets you up, gets you doing stuff, hedges your bets.
I've worked with a couple really great coaches over the last couple of years that I'm really grateful to have worked with. And one thing that both of them have said many, many times, and they remind me, is that, a lot of times the thing that you see as your weakness is also your superpower. And you have to accept the weakness if you want to accept the superpower as well, right? So I think that my anxiety is probably also linked to just how in tune with things I am. And I think that, Rick Rubin's talked about this, and maybe it sounds kind of cheesy to some people, but I think that there's probably some sort of collective consciousness. And I think that we probably pull ideas from something that's not just purely within our brain. Maybe that's crazy. Maybe it's not true, but I feel that it's accurate. And I think that people who are anxious may also just be a little bit more in tune with a lot of the energy that's around them and what they're pulling from. Maybe not. Maybe that's just me trying to make everything sound better than it is. But I do think that there is some connection to my superpower. I think it's like a sensitivity that I have.
Do you feel almost, and this is not to downplay it at all, because I definitely have my anxious moments, but do you feel that you have an understanding that anxiety is almost an illusion?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's because of anxiety is just the imagination running wild, right? And unfortunately, when you're a creative person, so I know a lot of creative people that struggle with it, your imagination's really good at running wild. And it can be, like I said, I do better, and I tend to be less anxious when I'm producing. That's because I'm using my creative brain for productive things. But if I'm not producing, then a lot of times my creative brain just goes on tears for, thinking about I don't know, the end of the world and how possible that is or whatever. And it might just start racing on that,
the what if stories.
All the what ifs. Yep. Yeah. Or maybe it goes into all the shoulds that you should be doing or whatever.
Which is easy this day and age with information just fire hosed in our face every day, right? Again, and I don't want to keep putting you on the spot, but what kind of advice or insights can you give the person at home that might be listening, watching this, that wants to take a jump into something, that wants to go and try something, but is their anxiety or their fearfulness is just holding them back? How can they just take that step?
My experience has been that my anxiety goes down when I take that step, and that's the thing that I think will probably shock a lot of people and maybe kind of the great irony of the whole thing. But it's a lot easier to imagine all the worst case scenarios than it is to just go out and try. And, maybe things won't work out that well, but chances are it won't be as bad as you can imagine. So, so my advice would be just go out and do it. And obviously that sounds easier. The whole Nike just do it thing, it sounds easier than it is, but you sit around and suffer, you might as well at least try. And if you're going to suffer, at least it's not imagined.
Yeah, one thing that always snaps me out of that is I come back to one question: what's the worst thing that can happen if I try this, right? And it's most of the time is my ego getting damaged. Obviously there are much bigger things than that if you're making a huge investment or if it's a health decision or something like that, obviously. But most of the time, most of these daily things, and certainly when it comes to creativity, it's the fear of looking like a dickhead or failing, right? And those often go hand in hand. How
Almost
much does
always.
the ego play into that, right?
Yeah, it's massive. It's absolutely massive. It's most of the time it's the case, I have that challenge with all kinds of things. There's certain things I have no fear of anymore because I've just done it so much, like creating products, super confident with that. But, we live in an era where creating content like this is so, so important. And I get massively anxious about just putting myself in front of a camera and talking, but every time I do it, I'm like, oh, that wasn't that bad. But I dread it for, 3 days before I do it, kind of thing.
Well, we certainly appreciate you jumping in with us. It's been an absolute privilege and an honor to have you on the show. And thank you so much for taking the time. Privileged to call you a friend now. So thank you for giving me that time. And safe journeys wherever you go to next. Hopefully I'll see you when I come back. But yeah, once again, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, man. It's a great time.
Cheers, buddy.
Cheers.
Testing 1 2 3 1 2 3.
Testing 1 2 3 1 2 3.
Ah, he's good there. Yeah, just turn him up a little bit.
What is this thing called? It's pretty cool.
Remarkable.
Remarkable.
Is it on the back? Yeah, remarkable.
That's slick.
Yeah. Keep wanting them to sponsor, but they're not keen. Fuck remarkable. They want to sponsor. Yeah, fuck them. Change to an iPad. See if Apple want to sponsor. Yeah, I sold the old one to Indy. Yeah, he loves it. All right, we're good? Recording? Really? I never look at that camera. Like how many in one episode? What? No. Then maybe I'm just looking at my print. Wide angle's good? Yeah. Should be moving left to right. Okay, cool. You good?
Yeah, let's do it.
Shane Vitaly. Oh.
Yeah.
Shane Vitaly. Welcome to the Move Podcast, man.
Thanks. Thanks. Start
Try again.
Yeah.
Take 3.
Good start.
All right, let me take it. And breathe. Clapper. Rap.
All right.
Where is the clapper?
It's on the.
Oh, yeah. Go on, let's just do a quick clap. And get the AC on. Are you hot now?
Yeah, no. Yeah.
This needs to be mandatory now. Well, this literally got this last week. Yeah.
So good.
Yeah. To give it to him today. It's a wrap.